This study session of the Town of Estes Park Board of Trustees is now underway at, well, a little bit after 5:45, but I had a very important delivery from one of the local Girl Scouts, so if you're upset about the late start, I'll give you a cookie.
Did you bring enough for everyone, Mr. Mayor?
Pretty close. Stanley Park Master Plan and Performing Arts Center, and I think Director Rob Hinkle will oversee this. Continuation, of course, of our prior discussion. It was so much fun, we decided to keep it going.
Well, that's exactly what I was going to say. So it's a continuation from the last meeting. I think you had some questions and more discussion to be had, but basically this is a quick summary of kind of what we have talked about over the last meetings, and then we're requesting a decision of whether you agree with the plan, or if you do agree with the plan, if so, do we need to do a revision of the master plan that includes the Performing Arts Center on the property, or is it treated as an alternate if fundraising targets are met? So I'm going to leave it open right now for more discussion.
Well, if I can take off with that. So after much thought and about, our capital expenditures and where we're headed and tax dollars and stuff like that, especially with the police department coming up, I don't think that we're going to be doing anything that outside of that, as far as putting money towards any big capital improvement. So I thought maybe this would be actually a good time to see if indeed the performing arts could put together that money, because I don't foresee us having any projects on that property in the near future. I think it would be a well-rounded addition to our community. I think nothing against what is going on there now, the rodeo, the horse show. I'm an avid horse person, so I love all those things. But I think having an addition to that this would offer to our community would help make it well-rounded. So I would be willing to have them come onto the property. I would think, I guess I don't know the pros and cons of putting them in the master plan or as an add-on. I'm thinking the add-on portion, because I really think it depends on if they're able to raise those funds, because we don't know what the future will hold. If they, worst case scenario, if they don't, what else would come down the pipe? But I certainly want to, it sounded like there's some ways, some workarounds for the property to get this going and to bring the cost down for moving things around and stuff like that. So I would be in favor of moving forward, letting them have that. It seemed like, if I recall, that 5-year mark, he said that the people indicated that if you can't raise the money in 5 years, then it can't go. I don't foresee us putting anything other than a police station money towards that in the next 5 years. So I think it's a great opportunity to see if we can't get this going. And I think it's a perfect location. I love the location. I think it would just be an added benefit. So that's where I would lean towards.
I assume if we move toward an add-on approach, that in addition to the time frame limit, there'd have to be some fundraising target, that within that there'd have to be either incremental targets or an ultimate target that you've got to raise within that 5 years this amount. I have no idea what that might be in relation.
I mean, I think those are discussions to evolve down the road. I don't think that's needed for today, so I didn't really think of that. Um, so, but I believe so. I think we need to have a discussion on how that looks and have them present, and who they're working with in order to raise those funds. Their expertise would be helpful in knowing how to, schedule those increments.
Consider the topic launched. Other trustees?
I'll weigh in. I do think the location's a great location for this if we are able to build it, and better than other ones that have been considered. I am skeptical about the ability to raise that kind of money. That's an awful lot of money to raise for a community our size. And I'm also sort of skeptical about the projections about the inner sanctum, whether those will come to fruition either. However, having said that, I'm not sure it matters whether I think you can do that or not, because it's going to be a private thing. I'm not comfortable with committing the property for 5 years. I think if we commit the property, we need to do it in increments and stages to show, and maybe, the more I've thought about it, we haven't really talked about who pays for relocation infrastructure expenses. I know there were some issues on ways in which we might be able to mitigate some of that expense. But when we do development, we normally have the developer pay for most of the infrastructure too. So we need to have a discussion about what, not all that infrastructure really directly related to this project either. That was part of it. Part of it was the stall barns and all kinds of other things that are part of the master plan, I think, for that. So my concern really is the feasibility of the project, but again, I don't think it's really up to us to determine the feasibility of the project. That's really up to whoever's promoting it. However, if we're going to commit our land for something, I don't want to have that as open-ended as a 5-year commitment. And so I would suggest something along one of the problems when you're raising funds is you're usually getting commitments. You're not necessarily getting cash in hand. And commitments, even though you can make them to a nonprofit, I think legally binding commitments, collecting on them can be a problem too on occasion. So I guess what I would like to see is something along the lines of getting fundraising commitments in a substantial portion of this within a year, just commitments, but binding legal commitments, because you can do that. They can be binding if you're a nonprofit, and it's a gift. But we would, get some substantial amount, and then we'd also have to kind of agree on the improvements as well as to who's going to pay for the improvements. So those are two obstacles that I think are major to getting this done. And so what I'm thinking of is something along the lines of getting $10 million of commitments within a year. We'd hold that property for the year pending, seeing if we get 10 million of commitments. And if we can get 10 million of commitments, that shows that there is the possibility that this thing might work. And in the meantime, we would be negotiating with the group to determine what improvements are needed and who should pay for them, because that's always part of our development process anyway. And that will affect the whole issue of fundraising anyway. So I think 10 million is not an unreasonable goal to have for a year. It won't get the whole project done, but I kind of feel like if we can't show 10 million of commitments within a year, the money just simply might not be there. And it's better for us to know that sooner rather than later.
Other trustees?
Well, guess I'll jump in here. I like Trustee Brown's idea, 5 years is a long time. And maybe some checkpoints along the way, sorry. I would also like to hear somewhat, we've talked about other things that we'd use the site for, but I'd like to hear more about what's the opportunity cost? I mean, what are we giving up? I mean, our bread and butter has been horse shows and some of these other things. They've been growing. We've asked you to expand on that. There's a lot of demand. We are a fairgrounds. So I'd like to see what we haven't talked about that at all, is we've talked about what the possible pro formas are for a performing arts center, but what is the loss we're gonna lose? But if we can't get certain sites, or we're gonna lose certain shows, or we can't expand shows, we're gonna lose to somewhere else that has more space. So I'd like to see more analysis on that end of what the opportunity costs are of giving up, 12% of the property. We've been down this road several times before with Performing Arts Center. I would love to have a Performing Arts Center here. I think it could do well. We go over to the Repertory Theater in Grand Lake all the time, every summer. Great theater, does fairly well, but it takes a lot of patrons and a lot of work. And we're awful close to the Front Range to compete with all that too, so. I don't think we should modify the master plan at this point, but allowing it to be an add-on and giving the folks, if they want to proceed, chances to come up and try and show us this will work, and the performers do work. But I would like to see that opportunity cost and what are we giving up to do this, before I just give it a wholehearted endorsement.
So I have to it's so hard because I really want a performing arts center. And, I think this is a great group to do it. I look at the history of the last 25 years of being here, and this is not this group's fault by any means, but you always get these hopes of having one and then it kind of dies, and having one and it kind of dies. And it concerns me that we can't get the money to build it. So that's number one. Number two is, I think that in some ways, Dr. Hinkle's too nice, and the fact that he's not really telling us really how it's going to affect the rodeo and the horse shows and everything else. And I'm with you on that. I think we really need to see those numbers and how we really think it's going to be affected. Not, if the trustees want it, we'll make it happen, because I know that's what our staff does, which is great, because the trustees are from the community. But I really want those numbers, and I really want people to speak up and go, this is really going to hurt the rodeo, or this is not going to hurt the rodeo, or this is really going to hurt the horse shows, or this is not going to. I don't feel like I'm getting that out of you, Rob, which I hate to say that, but I don't feel like I'm getting it. And a lot of it's, I know that you're trying to please everyone, but I don't want to please everyone. I want to get the information, and maybe you have it, maybe I haven't heard it enough. But I need to have those kind of numbers before I decide. I would love to have one. I would love to say that as an add-on, if they came up with a good amount of money, and I don't know what that number is, so I can't tell you what that number is, but maybe it's 10 million. I don't know. I don't think it's a bad number, but if we came up with sort of money within a year, okay, then have it more in the plan. I don't think the change in master plan right now is warranted, but I just have to have that information. And if that's all, and maybe you don't have it, maybe you really are kind of like, we really don't have it. Okay, but that still puts me on the fence. But I want to know, the nuts and, I don't know, whatever I want to say,
Sure.
nuts and bolts or whatever.
Sure.
So,
when we put together the master plan in 2019, things were a lot different. In fact, the study was really in 18. I'd been here about 2 years. And after COVID and through COVID, of course, the business changed a lot. And as we've expanded some of our festivals, one's coming up this weekend, the dog shows. And the reason I'm bringing these up is that if you look at the master plan, we have money to build a storage building right now. That building right now would sit right on top of where the festival would be this weekend. It would be sitting on top of where we have dog show camping at this point, and some of the other festivals and event parking, rodeo parking. It would take up a lot of space. So and I hate to keep saying a domino effect, but when you build something here, it shifts everything around. And so Tim had brought up last meeting about everything that's being stored outside along Highway 36. Everything we use out there, we use for events. It's all pieces of equipment that we need. We don't have a place to store it inside at this point, which it should be. So when it comes to building something on that piece of land right there, plus we're already utilizing now where we, in the master plan, that where our storage building was. Now we're looking at shifting the master plan again. Where's that storage building gonna go? Trying to find room. It's not a very big piece of land when you start having to shift things around. And so that's what we're running into. And it does affect those type of shows. So.
Okay. I guess my problem is I don't have enough feeling. I mean, my feeling is I'd love to have a performing arts center. That's my feeling. I don't have enough information to make a really good, sound decision. And I don't know how to get that information. 'Cause I understand what you're saying. I mean, everything would be moved around, and we probably could make it work because we always make things work. But is it the best use of that land? I'm not sure. I feel bad because here they looked at the property over by the other side. Yes. And, you know, we were the ones saying, oh, well, you really should look here. And we feel like we're just, yeah, exactly, which is not good either. I would like to see something there. I would like to, but I'm not sure in the scope of it, in the size of it, is the proper use for that land. So even though I started this conversation with saying that I think we could keep it as an add-on addition, and I still kind of do. I don't know if there has to be some kind of tweaking that we can use that land a little more efficiently. Because I don't want to take away the property and take away the space that we need for these other events and say, okay, well, we have this now, so we can't have that event, or we can't have as many cowboys come, or we can't have this horse show or that horse show because we don't have this space. So I guess I'm still leaning towards, I'm so wishy-washy on this, I'm still leaning toward being treated as an add-on, but I'm hesitant. It kind of depends on, and it feels bad because I'm saying they have to raise the money, and then I'm still saying I'm hesitant. So I guess I should just stop talking because I'm going around in circles in my head because I want it, but I'm not sure if it's the spot. So.
Oh, I'm so glad you went first because I feel very similarly. And a lot of times, you know, when you're up here, you try to think about what you're going to say before you say it. And it's really hard to wrap it together because what I keep coming around to, and my concern is that, you know, I asked Town Administrator Mahalik after the last meeting, you know, kind of, if we would have anything that would need, you know, that any financial capacity to undertake those projects, as Trustee Youngland was talking about, in the next few years. And in my brain, the thought was, what's the harm if we, you know, block it off, you know, and see if they can raise the money and see what happens. But then the harm is, then we've got this issue later of this 7 million, you know, that we've got to deal with. And what if we decide we've added all these additional events that have really, you know, become signature, you know, experiences for the community, and it's going to be an issue that we have to address later. So I totally understand where you're coming from, Marie, on that, and I feel like I'm chasing around in circles there too. I think I would be inclined at this point to consider the shorter terms, as Trustee Brown suggested, but I'd have to be really convinced with a good, you know, with the solid amount of monetary commitment and with a good negotiation with staff that we feel like it's actually productive and possible. And I agree that is not entirely helpful when you're trying to raise money and you're saying, we think this is going to work out for us, but we're still negotiating through the process. And I agree, Marie, that this is the reason we're talking about this is because, you know, the town board, a different town board, but still the town board directed at, you know, that we view this property and kind of see if it's available. So it's a really tough position, and I tend to lean toward that alternate as well, so that we can see what the options might be versus just cutting something off at the knees. But I am a little bit concerned that we will, you know, eternal optimist that the money will be raised, we'll have the opportunity for that facility to be there. And then now we've got a whole nother set of problem solving that we need to overcome. Finding funds for those relocation, or infrastructure expenses, or, negotiating how those are going to be funded, as Trustee Brown mentioned. So I think that's where I'm tentatively leaning here. It's not my first choice as a place for a performing arts center in our community, but as we continue to confront, the asset of land is such a dwindling opportunity here, and we've got to really, I think, start to get creative. So it's not a great answer, but that's where I'm slightly headed toward.
Thanks. The term you used, asset of land, really is the number one thing that is on my mind with this. And in poking into different groups and people, and a little bit with events and people who have organized events here in the space, and some of the descriptions of that property, although it seems so big, is not really that big. And one of the conversations I had after the prior meeting, that Tim, you were describing that massive things on the side of Stanley Park, I thought, yeah, by golly, that is a little messy coming into town, and could we do better? And I spoke with Rob about that, and we spent quite a bit of time talking about what the logistics are of running an operation that big. The fairgrounds is not massive. It takes a while to walk from one side to the other, but in the scale of the events that this town is asking that department to do, the department has been charged with increasing shows, increasing attendance, increasing size, increasing and working off events that are already occurring. And I think that asset of land issue is, for me, at the heart of this. And I don't know that that's the right location for this project. There are smaller things that stand out to me. Last time we talked about this, the complicated series of things that have to go and how successful the inner sanctum would be, and the numbers, and we could shuttle, and we could park at the school, and there were all these things that could happen to make it work. But if we have to do all of those things to make it work, it should be easier than that. If it's a good location, if it's a good setup. But when we're shifting things around, having dealt with events and emergencies and planned events, and even on a small scale of scouting or things where you're dealing with a lot of people or facilities, those challenges, I think, may be deal breakers that we realize too late. So I'm not comfortable gambling with that asset of land for this project. Part of that is the history of fundraising, which to me is not the success or failure of the group. That is a measure of the sentiment of this community, for me. Going back a couple of decades, just it's always been in the community that we're talking about this project. And as much as I want to go, I have to separate my desire to attend something like this, or to be a patron of this, or to provide this to other people, from, is that the best investment for our community? And the feeling I get from the last 20 years of trying to raise money for this kind of a project is that the community support is not there. In my conversations the last couple of weeks about how would this work with other events? Is this the right place? Is this something you would support? Despite the survey that we had in front of us for several hundred people that weighed in, I am not getting the sense of an overwhelming amount of support. So all that negative, I think that if we are to go forward with this in any capacity in the town, with this asset of land, the investment of the group in this project would have to be substantial in a short amount of time financially. And I think that it would, the difference between commitments and I sign a pledge card and I deliver the money is pretty different. And I think that there are statistics on that would support we need to really overshoot this. And you said 10 million and you, just out of the blue, you might have to shoot for 15 million to get 10 million or less than that. So I think for the town, for me to be comfortable representing, as I feel I am, this type of use of a town land asset, the effort would have to be substantial financially, probably in a couple years' time. Then we run into the ripple effect of putting a placeholder on land at the fairgrounds, and there's already a building on hold. There's already stuff visible from the highway that's used all the time, but it looks unsightly when it's in storage out in the public because there's nowhere else to go with it. So it feels like, I heard somebody say, kicking this can down the road. I feel like this needs to come to a decision point, and probably not at a study session, but as an action item in a meeting where we take a vote and this town board gives direction on this issue. But at this time, I would not support moving forward in that location on the fairground, on the Stanley Park property for all of these things and the 6 things I didn't bring up. I feel like I'm the negative Nelly here at the end, and I want to go, but I also want to be responsible with this asset I feel we're charged with.
Thanks for the good comments. I've heard a couple of very tentative, hesitant endorsements of the idea of an add-on. I've heard 3, I believe, endorsements of an add-on with potential of how much time and how much money commitments would have to be there. As Trustee Eigel points out, taking it to a board meeting with an actual, as a discussion or vote item with an add-on proposal or a Plan A or Plan B for an add-on proposal, that could be the next step. I appreciate the insights. Trustee Brown, did you have additional?
Yeah, I got a question for Rob. So it's been my impression that this project would create some problems for your part of the town business. But I don't get the sense that there were really insurmountable problems. They're just problems based upon comparing with and without, it changes what you have to do. And, I think Trustee Eigel, or somebody asked, Marie asked, what's the cost of this? And I don't know if there's any way to really come up with that. But it seems to me that we could probably still have most of those events. We would just have problems accommodating all of the traffic and the horses and things like that we would have to then make other arrangements for. Is that kind of an accurate?
What it comes down to is the level of frustration.
Yeah.
And losing shows because of level of frustration, or not getting potential shows in the future. I'll just give you one example. The national dog shows that we do and specialty shows, they like to be really close to where they're showing their dogs. So whether they're grooming in their vans, camping in their vans, whatever it may be. And so it without that land close to the event center and the pavilion, we would probably not get as many of those types of shows, at least the bigger ones. You get into just the level of frustration at times with just parking horse trailers. And then shows like this weekend where, they're utilizing land that we never even thought about being utilized for shows. Ski joring was another one. Yeah. Which was very successful. So those things change. And so it's hard to predict in the future what that may be. But the loss of income or the impact of that, those are the types of things that are going to weigh into it.
Sure. I just wanted to say one more thing. I think the location for Encore at this location will actually help in its success. And if we move it somewhere else, it might not be as successful because of its visibility coming into town. That's a huge difference here. And so I don't want to give up the site as a prospect, but I still think we need the financial showing to make any sort of ongoing commitment for that. Because we don't have any specific use other than for these other things right now. So we're not using it. We're not committing it to something else in the meantime. But if your group can show significant financial commitments, then we might look at it differently. Because I think there's a lot of skepticism here about raising the money. And that seems to be all over this thing. And if we can remove that or at least attenuate it, that may affect our views on this.
So, okay, go ahead.
Just real quick. I mean, I get that, and I've been around and heard, through the different organizations or groups that tried to raise the money. But I think it would be very unfair to make a decision based on past performance. And I just would really hope that we could come to some agreement to at least have them, try to raise the money in a way in which we would feel comfortable. I mean, I think you make things work, right? We didn't realize that ski touring would work there until we tried it. There's so many things that have, the Christmas in the park for Visit Estes Park and how they did that new thing this year and made it bigger. You don't know till you try. And so, we could be sitting here 10 years from now going, oh my gosh, this is such a great revenue maker. And it's all, it's almost year round and we almost didn't do it, So I really would hope that we could try to keep open minds. I know land's very valuable and there's not much left, but, I don't want us to forget the possibility of the good things that this could bring to our community, so.
So again, we've heard three fairly strong endorsements to go for an add-on with a time limit of 1 to 2 years for a target funding. We've heard a couple who are very hesitant. We're about to hear from Trustee Lancaster with a bit of additional information, and
Well, just
I'll
to-
finish my statement then.
Just to follow up, I think earlier in one of the meetings, we talked about what's the exit strategy. If it doesn't work out, if we build this thing and, we don't want to be stuck with this white elephant out there. And I look at Broomfield with the First Bank Center, and they're tearing that down to the ground after just, 15, 20 years. And they went up right after we built the ranch. I was involved in building the ranch and the Budweiser events, Blue Center now, I guess it is. But I still would like to see that too, you don't want to plan for failure, but you also need to be prepared. So I don't think we ever saw when we asked before for what's the exit strategy if this doesn't work out. And we've got this building on our land. What are we going to do with it? Are we going to have to take it over? Are we going to be stuck with maintaining it? If it doesn't financially work, what's plan B?
So without recapping the numbers, it sounds to me, and as though we could, town administrator, put together a concept or A and B of an add-on.
Mayor, just for clarity's sake, what staff would likely bring forward is the ad alternate master plan. The master plan update, the ad alternate for consideration with a tag on the ad alternate that it was subject to future town board approval of a agreement if it were to move forward. I don't think at this point we want to try to bring all of that at once because that agreement will likely take some time to negotiate.
Right.
If the board would like to see the agreement at the same time you see the ad alternate, we would just bring that later and would work with Attorney Kramer and the Encore team to negotiate a draft agreement for board consideration. I think it's probably simpler to do the master plan update with the ad alternate that's subject to future board approval of a agreement if the board wants to approve a master plan update with the ad alternate.
Well,
But I
that-
did want to get some
yeah.
clarity on that, if the board was expecting to see a full board agreement the next time this comes forward.
I don't think a full bore agreement, in my opinion, but some of those questions will likely come up in the discussion, like an exit strategy, for example.
What we'll likely do is outline kind of the parameters of what we would be discussing and negotiating to make sure that there's nothing that we're missing. And then that'll give us a jumping point off if the board approves that update and the ad alternate into negotiations with the Encore team.
Any other comments? Then you have what you need, Town Administrator. We'll go ahead and, Rob, did you have any other commentary to make? The one, the storage building and the conflict of acreage there, and all of the adjustments and movements that would certainly have to occur by event or whatever, it concerns me that that's a lot of juggling. It's kind of like one of those puzzles where, you can only move one piece at a time and you have limited space and you're trying to get everything in the right order. But like Trustee Youngland and a few others said, we're probably as adaptable a town that's ever existed with all the fun we have up here. But thanks very much.
Thank you.
Future study session items.
Mayor, just two considerations tonight. After further discussions with staff and especially IT staff and town clerk staff, we would like to remove the town board email listing on website from future study sessions. We've talked about that a lot and don't think at this point it makes sense to change anything. So unless the board wants to have that conversation with that recommendation, we would suggest removing that and keeping email listings as they are right now.
Okay.
And then the second item is we would like to come talk, give a presentation about the police department facility update on May 13th, which is quickly turning into PD night.
Certainly.
That's all I have, Mayor.
And I believe we removed the May 25th Estes Park Health update that the board chair was going to give to us, and they have not yet specified a date when they will come in.
Correct. So we have moved that to approved unscheduled, and when they reach out with a new date, we'll get that back. Since that's already been approved, we'll just slot that in where we're able to.
Other topics?
So I propose we have an executive session to discuss negotiations relating to the Olympus Lodge. We know that the guy pulled his contract, but he definitely left an opening that I think we should explore to see whether there's any possibility that we can resurrect that.
Oh, what would be the reason for executive session
Because
rather than open
Because
session?
we have to figure out negotiation-wise what we would offer or what we would expect from the developer in terms of improvements, in terms of who's paying for what.
For annexation,
Yeah.
but not for the project itself, which has to be in public hearing.
Yeah, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah,
because the
but it's
topic-
still
the-
negotiating as to what we are going to expect from the deal, because, at some point, our expectations just, might be too much for this developer, and that's fine. But we need to know what our expectations are from our end to see if there's a possibility of a deal being saved here. I think and part of the reason I'm saying this is I think there's quite a bit of general community support for the project. It's unlike some others where there's some definite community opposition. I'm sure some of the neighbors, are concerned about sightlines and stuff like that, but I think we all see that as a major improvement to the community if it can be done, particularly where it's located too. And maybe I'm wrong about that, but that's my perception of it. And so rather than just letting the thing go, I think we ought to give it a shot to see whether it's salvageable.
Well, our town attorney Kramer had separated the two pieces of annexation versus the actual project, and the annexation was something that wasn't subject to the ex parte communications,
Right.
for example, and hence there
Yeah,
was some.
and that's probably the platform on which we need to develop it, because that's a critical first step to anything here. And this property, unlike some others, I understand does not need to be rezoned in order to go forward. So what we're really talking about that's going to be something where we're limited on who we can talk to is the development plan, and we're not there. We're quite a ways away from the development plan, even though they've talked about it, I think.
Well, negotiations is one of the legal items for executive session, as long as these negotiations would fall within the appropriate bounds, which I would confer with Town Attorney Pro Tem here, Greg Miles, or with Mr. Kramer.
Yeah, you can go in executive sessions for negotiations. And it would be with regard, if I don't know much about this, but with regard to what the town would expect.
Yeah, the
in
conditions to,
return in the annexation portion of that project.
yeah, the conditions to annexation.
Mr. Miles in the front row, I realized I called you Greg Miles because he's been in Greg White. Yeah, there you go. You just got promoted, or you either got promoted or demoted. So, yeah, there you go. Okay, thank you, Town Attorney.
I kind of think that, I don't know, I kind of feel like it should be a public discussion. And maybe I'll defer to Attorney White, but, I mean, I don't think there's anything that, I just can't see what would be in the conversation that would not be public knowledge for what we feel. And maybe I'm just not getting the whole gist of the conversation.
We couldn't make any decision without having a public meeting. So it's not for the purpose of making the decision. It's a purpose of hearing us out and seeing the alternatives and seeing the pros and cons of various things. So that's what a negotiation's all about. And we would presumably, if it looks like the town board wants to go in a direction of trying to save it, I don't even know the town board does at this point, but if they do, then we go back into public session to take action. Because I don't think we certainly cannot take action in the executive session, but I do think we need probably a discussion about the pros and cons of it. And we can have that in public session too, if it's just that the nature of it is such that I think there's some merit from our standpoint in keeping it a little close to the vest before we approach the developer about it. Because you don't want to give away all your secrets when you're negotiating a deal. So it will invariably end up in public session, but I'm just saying the first step is an executive session to see whether we think there's something there that we should follow through with. That's really as far as I would go with it.
Well, yeah, there has not been a substantial town controversy related to that. And so it does fall a little bit different than, some of the things that we know will come to public hearing. Trustee Lane.
Yeah, I think there actually is a nuance too in the Open Meetings Act. Greg, correct me if I'm got this right, but I think it says we can go into executive session for negotiations to give direction to negotiators. We are not negotiating, we would give direction to staff on what they should do during negotiations, which it's subtle, but that is I think an important difference there. And I weigh in on that, and then I had a question for Travis as well.
Trustee Lancaster is correct. That is what the statute says. And I think executive sessions are very common with regard to communities discussing annexations, because by the nature of the annexation, and when you annex a property, that's the community has the city or the town has an opportunity to enter into almost contract negotiations for an annexation. One of the few things in municipal law that you can actually negotiate, and those negotiations usually are done, at least discussed in executive session, and then the staff or whatever is dealing with the developer follows through and Obviously, the final product is subject to public scrutiny and approval.
And then, Travis, you met and talked with them and had some discussions with the developer, right? And which I think they've left. I just want to make sure, what's your feeling? Is there any light at, any hope pulling this event, or are we beating a dead horse?
I do believe, as Trustee Brown mentioned, that there is that the applicant left the door open for further negotiations. As you all know, and it was in the public email server, so in the public realm, the sticking point is the roundabout traffic improvement there and the extra cost there, and that is the single negotiation item at hand right now.
My question is we aren't the only players. I mean, the annexation piece is obviously us, but we're not the only players when it comes to the roundabout. So I guess I'm wondering or that area of road. So I guess I'm wondering too, what's the viability of us having a productive conversation with or without CDOT at the table, or how that, you know what I mean? If there's any pre-work there that needs to be done.
Yeah, ultimately, any improvements on this property will be subject to the ability to get a CDOT access permit. I want to be very clear that CDOT has not said that there's roundabout or nothing. They have left, generally speaking, an open door to considering different intersection alternatives.
So in this executive session, if we were giving direction for negotiations, that would be what we'd be doing, is chatting about that and giving direction to town administrator for his future negotiations. And then we'd be within legal bounds of the definition. Well, I'm okay with getting that. Would it be, we do executive session at the end of a town board meeting, presumably, too?
Typically, yes.
Yeah, so that folks could not necessarily
Don't do it
stick
after a
around.
long town board meeting, please.
We would likely, if the board is accepting of adding this item to the agenda, we would likely put it on the next town board agenda for March 25th. There's not a whole lot of additional pre-work that needs to be done. We've looked at this extensively across all the parties, and we have a pretty good sense of where the sticking points are. So I think that's a realistic timeline. I don't know what the agenda for the 25th looks like, but we would endeavor to put it on the next board meeting if the board approves this agenda item.
Yeah, let's do that. And if you do find that it's a 22 agenda item already, then we'll reconsider the date that we consider that. Okay. Any other topics? All right, then, this study session is ended. What's the